Good afternoon and welcome to this session where I'll be looking at some of the new features and functionalities that have been released in Business Central 2022 Release Wave 2. That's version 21 in old money. So in this session I've picked out I think about 12 different features that I think are the highlights of what they've released in this version. If you want to see the complete list or find out more information about anything I've shown, then you can go to the addresses on the screen now and then navigate through to SMB, Dynamics 365 Business Central, and then what's new and planned, and we'll pop this link up in the chat or the questions area in just a moment. So let's start looking at these features. Microsoft have made some changes to the action bars. So as an example, if we look under new documents, we can see here the sales quotes, orders, invoices, etc. New documents also appears under the actions menu. However, what they've done is any items that don't appear under the new document on the main menu are still shown here, and anything that does appear under new documents is then tucked away under other, so it's out of sight and out of mind. So this reduces the amount of clutter that you see when you look at these actions on the toolbar. What they've also done is added this new split button. So the example here is dimensions multiple. This is an action you can click on, but is also further a drop down to dimensions multiple and dimensions single. If you use Word or Excel, you would be familiar with this type of action, but they now introduced it into Business Central. In a previous Dynamics changes, I spoke about the Power Automate functionality that's now been added to Business Central. This allows you to run flows from within Business Central. However, Microsoft have realised that not every customer will be using this functionality. I don't know why you wouldn't do, but they might not be. So what they've done is they've added in a new permission set called Automate Exec. This permission set is added by default to users when they're set up within the system. However, if you remove that permission set from the users, it will mean that that action will disappear from them, will no longer be visible to them. So again, it's another way of just tidying up those action bars to make sure that the users see what is relevant to them. Another very minor amendment that covers both the action bars and also the Power Automate is that you now have the ability to move Power Automate flows that you've generated up to your main toolbar. You couldn't do this previously. So again, under personalization, you can personalize, select the flow you want to move, and then you can move it up onto a toolbar elsewhere. Click done, and then those actions are very quickly and easily accessible from the top level of these toolbars, or wherever you choose to put it. Another feature that has been added is to help you quickly change between companies and environments that you have access to. Previously, if you wanted to change company, you need to go into My Settings, then into the company drop-down, select the company, click OK, and it would reload Business Central for you. If you had different environments that you went to as well, for instance, production environments or sandbox environments, it was an even more complicated process. So what we now have is the company switcher. So this will appear as two different icons. If you've only got one environment, it's a single icon like a building. If you've got multiple environments you can access, you see this kind of action here. If we click on it, you then see a list of all the companies you can access in your existing current environment, in this case the production environment. You can also see companies that you can access in other environments, such as a sandbox environment. So you can quickly and easily change between companies in one environment or switch to an entirely different one, very quickly and simply. In this case, I'm in the Cronus UK company. If I want to switch into Cronus SH in the production company, I click on it here and I can switch. Or on the drop down here, I've got an option to open it in a new tab that just opens the company in a separate tab, or open a new tab and go to the same list. So for instance, I'm looking at the Cronus company customer list here. If I click on this action, it opens up in a new tab, and at the same time it will open up and show me the customer list, which means I can very quickly and easily switch and compare the different lists between the different companies. Furthermore, there's a search button here as well. So in the search button, if you've got a great big long list of companies, you can type in the company name. It filters the list to show the companies that match what you've typed in. Then you can switch. Again, if you've got one or two, it doesn't make a great deal of difference, but if you've got hundreds of companies in your system, this is a very quick, easy way to find those companies and switch between them. For a number of years now, Business Central has allowed you to design and have multiple different layouts for each report in Business Central. A few years back, they also allowed you to set up different layouts for different customers or vendors, for instance. So when you sent out a sales order, you could send out a sales order with a different layout to a different customer. In the recent version release, they've also extended this functionality still further. So if we look at a report, in this case the age accounts receivable, when I run the report, I get an option to select the report layout that I want to run the report with. So in this case, it's defaults to the standard printout report. If I click preview, I'll then see the standard age accounts receivable report. I can also choose to run the report, and if I select the Excel layout, the option down here, change to download, I can now download the Excel layout that I've built and imported to the system for this particular report. And here you can see that Excel layout that is just downloaded. So it's a nice piece of functionality, very simple. Run the report, select the layout that you want to print or download the report using. This next change is a really big one, but it's hidden in the background, so you might not be aware of it unless you really start looking into the new functionality. After 20 plus years of me using the system, they finally introduced a way in which you can exclude permissions within the permission sets. So in the past, you could only ever include permissions. So for instance, if you wanted a user to not be able to see customer ledger entries or general ledger entries, it wasn't an easy way to do that. You had to build completely new permission sets and then work from there. So I'm in here as a user called Adele, and Adele has got a normal Business Central premium permission set, which allows her to go to the chart of accounts, for instance, and see in the chart of accounts all the net changes and balances. So she can drill down on these, she can see the entries that underlie them. So we've decided as a business we don't want our users to be able to see all the transactional detail, but we want them to still be able to see all the general ledger accounts. So if I flip across to my administration user, in here I've created a new permission set. This permission set is called D365 Business Premium No GL. Within the permission set, you can see they've introduced some new functionality. As well as being able to add individual permissions, you can also add entire permission sets to another permission set. So this gives you a hierarchical setup. In this permission set that I've created, I've specified to exclude the general ledger entry table, as we can see here, and I've then included these 3 standard permission sets. By including standard permission sets, as they are upgraded in the future with new releases, they'll be maintained and will stay within this top level permission set that I've created. So we're not affecting those standard permission sets in any way. I'll now look at Adele's user. I'm going to remove this group membership that she's got here, which gives us some of the standard permission sets in this section here. And instead, I'm going to add in this new permission set that I've created. Now she has the new permission set assigned to her. That gives her all the permissions that she had previously, except it will now exclude the general ledger entries. So I'll flip back across to her and I'll log back in. So this is Adele now, and if I go to Finance and then Chart of Accounts, you can see she can still see the chart of accounts, but because she's no longer got permissions to see the general ledger entries, the net change and balance columns have vanished, so they're no longer there. It's a little bit tricky to get this set up, but obviously we've got some experience of doing this now, so if it's something you're interested in and you're using the latest version of Business Central or you're in a SaaS environment, then talk to us and we can help you start setting up your permission sets even better than they are currently. A couple of versions ago, Microsoft introduced functionality to allow you to link to OneDrive from Business Central. It was slightly limited in what you could do with it, but in this version they've now extended that functionality and give you some setup that you can go through. So I'm in the assisted setup page, and if you go and find connect your files to the cloud and click on that, you'll then get presented with this OneDrive setup page. So the OneDrive setup gives you 2 options effectively. You can configure the OneDrive handling, so this allows you to use OneDrive to store files. And you can also set it up so if we tick this box here, it will open up any files that you want to open up in Excel, for instance, in the web version of Excel. So we'll click on next. It's carried that out and that is now successfully set up. So next we go through and we'll show you how you can then use this functionality in Business Central. Here are a couple of the uses of the new OneDrive functionality. So I'm in a customer list. I'm sure you're all familiar and aware of the edit in Excel functionality that's been there for a number of years. So the second option in the setup means that if I click edit in Excel, it will store a copy of this file, onto my OneDrive. If it already exists, it gives me the option of overwriting it, replacing or using the existing one, meaning there's less duplication of files being saved. I'm going to click replace. So it's now creating a new file in my online OneDrive. Once it's created that file, it then opens it up in the online version of Excel, which you can see here. And then the pop-out opens it up and then brings the data through from Business Central. So I now have a list of all my customer data from Business Central. Then again, if you're familiar with this, I can then change it. So if I want to change one of those salespeople codes there, I can change that, publish it back to Business Central. And if I flick back to Business Central and then refresh the page, you can see the salesperson code's been updated. So again, it's seamless. Everything we're doing is in the browser. It also, that file where it's stored in OneDrive, if I move across to OneDrive, you can see here in my files on OneDrive, there's now a Business Central folder that's been created, and it then creates you a company within that for each company within Business Central, in this case Quotas UK, and the file is then stored inside there. The second use for this new functionality is to store documents and attachments within OneDrive. So if I go to my sales orders and open up the first sales order, there's a feature which you may or may not be aware of, but from the print option, you can attach as PDF. I think it was introduced a couple of versions ago. So if I click attach as PDF and I say which of the reports I want to attach, in this case the order confirmation, and I say OK, it generates me a PDF copy of this order. It attaches it to the order, so you can see it here within the document, and it's also stored that file in my OneDrive. So here I've got the attachment to the sales order. It's stored in my OneDrive. I can open it in OneDrive if I wish. I can also click on the share button. So this share then allows me to share this particular file. So I'm going to replace the one that's already there. And then how do I want to share it? So I can then open up the share link here. I can go into Outlook if I want, and it opens up again, Outlook in the web, with a new email, with an attachment to the file in my OneDrive directory as well. So I can then send an email to one of my colleagues, order confirmation, and then send that off. I think this piece of functionality is really starting to come to fruition, and I think over the next 1 or 2 versions we're going to see an awful lot more functionality like this. If you use account schedules, you'll find now that when you search for them in version 21, instead of account schedules appearing, they're now called financial reports. This is a bit of a tidy up to make it easier for new people coming into the system. So a financial report has also been broken down to slightly different sort of segments. What we see here is the name of each financial report, and for each financial report there's then a row definition and a column definition. The row definition is what effectively used to be the account schedule. So if you look at one of these here, the analysis row, you then have all the row structures with the totaling accounts and all the old detail you used to see in the old account schedules. So again, it's not a major change. They added an extra layer at the top level to allow you to define row definitions and column definitions, but principally they've just been renamed to financial reports. In Business Central and in the vision before it, it's always been the case that the posting date for a document or a journal was the date that was used on the VAT return. In some circumstances isn't correct, so Microsoft have made a decision to split out the dates within the system. So on transactions there are now VAT date fields. How you want this to behave is up to you. So on the general ledger setup, which you can see here, there is now a default VAT date field. You can set it up so the default VAT date comes from the posting date or from the document date. So for instance, when you create a sales order, whichever date you fill in will drive the VAT date on that document. If we then go and have a look at a sales order, you can see on the header, on the general tab, there is now a VAT date field. As I said, this can be changed manually on each document if you so wish. It will default in, but you can change it if you need to. For instance, if it's after a VAT return, so a VAT quarter, you could change the date to be the next date if you wanted. You can also correct entries that have been posted. So if you've posted a document and realised you've made a mistake with the VAT entry, rather than going through and completely crediting and reposting the invoice, if you come to the VAT entry screen here and click on the edit list field, the VAT date then becomes editable. You can't change anything else in here, so you can't change the values or the document numbers or anything, just the VAT date. But it's an easy way to go through and modify and fix data in the system. Then when you come to carry out your VAT return, if we look at the VAT statement page, and this occurs in other parts of the VAT system as well, when we run the template and preview it, this VAT statement, you can see there's now a VAT date type filter up here, so you can choose whether to use the posting dates, the document dates, or the VAT dates when you run this. So again, an improvement in the functionality there to allow you to deal with different scenarios that you as a business might have. Item variants are a nice feature within Business Central. They allow you to have multiple types of the same item rather than having multiple items in your item list. So for instance, if we look at our item list, we have item number 1000, which is felt tip pens. Now what we don't want though is 5 or 6 different types of felt tip pen as items in the item list. So I've created this item here, and then underneath it we have item variants. We have a blue, a green and a red felt tip pen. One of the problems historically with variants has been there's been no way of enforcing that you use them on documents. So if you have variants and someone adds an item onto a sales order that has variants, it doesn't ensure that they filled in a variant code before they release that order. What that then means is you get data in your system which is bad data effectively, it's not correct. And this has caused problems. So it's meant that a lot of people have either made changes to their system or they've not used variants at all and have just stuck with long lists of items. What they've added in now is the ability to make the variants mandatory. So on the inventory setup, if we go into here, there is now a field called variant mandatory if it exists. So if you turn this on, it will then affect any items in the system that have variants set up against them. At an item level, you can also override it. So on this particular item, as with any item, it defaults to yes. So if the item variant mandatory is turned on, it will be mandatory for the items, but you can override it on an item by item level if you so wish. What this then means is when you go to say a sales order or a journal or an order, whatever it might be, if you go to a sales order, open one up and then add in the item 1000 and we'll enter a quantity of 1. What you can see on the line here is that the variant code has this mandatory field in it. For now, I'm not going to fill it in, so ignore the fact there's none in stock. If I now try and release this order without filling in the variant code, what I get straight away is an error saying the variant code must have a value on the sales line. This also applies to journals and the like. So if I now go and fill in the variant code and say actually I want 1 blue pen please, again I've got none in stock but ignore that, and now I try and release it, it will now let me release that particular order. So that is now released. So again, it's just a little step in the system to ensure that the data that you have remains valid and makes the variants a whole lot more usable as standard out of the box. In the previous release, the inventory and warehouse pick functionality was extended to be able to generate from jobs. So like with a sales order, when you generate an inventory pick from a sales order, you could then carry out the creation of an inventory pick from a job card using this action here. However, one point that was then raised was if you use item tracking, so if you use serial numbers or lot tracking or package tracking, there was no way of putting that information in against a job prior to creating the inventory pick. So again, depending on your processes, it might be that someone in the back office determines the serial number of an item to use prior to asking the warehouse to pick it. So in this version, they've extended the item tracking functionality to allow you to pick it from a job. So on job planning line here, we have an item, so SP BOM 1107, the circuit board, which has a requirement for item tracking against it. There's now an action up here, item tracking lines, and if I click on that when I'm on the line, I can come in here and then select the serial number or lot number or package number, depending on what you're using, that you want to use for this particular item on this job line. So I can pick serial number 50 there, say OK, it's then selected, I can close that line, and that's now assigned to that job planning line. So then when I go through and run the create inventory pick process, it will transfer that serial or lot number through to the inventory pick to tell the warehouse person what it is they need to pick from the shelves. This last what's new is a small cherry on the top of the cake, and I think it's more of a happy accident than by design. So if you search for posted lines, previously you can only find posted documents, so a posted sales invoice, a posted sales credit memo, a posted warehouse receipt, whatever it might be. What they've now done is they've added all the line pages. So if you want to get a list of all the posted lines in your system rather than on a document by document basis, you can now come in here, fire up the page, and it will show you all of historical information for all the different posted documents in your system. And of course, you then got the ability to send it out to Excel if you so wish, or copy and paste it, or send it to Teams, whatever you want to do with it. But again, it's a nice little feature. I think it's more by accident, but it's there now, so make use of it. I hope you found that session useful, and hopefully there are some new features and functionalities in this new release that you will use going forwards. If you want to talk to us about any of these, if you want to talk to us about an upgrade or potentially moving to the SaaS environment, then please drop us an email or call us. If you've got any questions, pop them into the chat and we can answer them now. If not, thank you for listening and watching.